to write blasphemous books or write books anti-Islam without no one from the West coming forward and attacking them. Recently in Canada, a girl who used to be part of the Shia community writes a book called The Trouble with Islam. Imagine that. She used to be part of the Shia community. She writes a book called The Trouble with Islam. Her name's Irshad Manji. She used to live in Canada and now she's written this book. If the book was worth any credit, I would have praised it. But it wasn't worth any credit. That was the thing. But the thing is, suddenly everyone begins to interview this lady because people look for controversy. And it brings me to my point today in this lecture, looking at what you've all been hearing about in the last couple of days, about those cartoons that have been produced against the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. When one looks at those cartoons and you see what exactly it describes the Prophet Muhammad as, it's all well and good the Muslim world feeling sorry for themselves. Many will feel sorry, it's a shame that someone has done that about the Prophet Muhammad. But how many in the Muslim world can actually reply? How many in the Muslim world will actually boycott even a Danish product? Because the country in Denmark, for those of you who don't know about the incident, 12 cartoons, caricatures, which they do in magazines or in comics or in newspapers, 12 of them were done about the Prophet Muhammad. And amongst the 12 was a picture of the Prophet Muhammad with a turban and a bomb which is fizzing in that turban. About the Prophet Muhammad. A turban with our Prophet's face there, and then a bomb which is fizzing within the turban, which is getting ready to blow up. When you look at something like this in the Islamic world, the Muslim world must straight away unite. Sunni, Shia, whatever the names are, they must all come forward and unite to defend Rasulullah. Because in this day and age, that is the test to tell you whether you would have been with Aba Abdullah or you would have been with the people of Kufa. Because the people of Kufa, what were they saying? They said Muslim bin Aqil has his opinion, and Ibn Ziyad has his opinion. We'll leave them to have their fight. Allah will hopefully bring reconciliation. In the same way in the Islamic world today, it is vital that when anyone writes about our Prophet Muhammad, that every single person in this hall picks up a pen and a paper or goes on a keyboard and begins to write a reply to exhibit their anger. Because in Denmark these pictures were shown. In Italy these pictures were shown. In Spain these pictures were shown. At least even the US government said these pictures are of an offensive nature. You notice how the US government in this case is looking to defend the Muslim world by saying this is of an offensive nature. But it's not enough for a person who doesn't believe in Islam to defend me. Thank you very much. It's appreciated. But we need a few more Muslims to pick up a few more pens and actually recognize that, hold on, am I really able to defend Rasulullah or no? Am I? So they put a turban with a bomb in it. And this bomb indicates that the Prophet Muhammad brought a Quran with a message of holy war. Imagine you see a verse in the Quran where it says, kill them wherever you see them. Imagine you see that verse. Is that acceptable? Imagine you see a verse in the Quran which says, fight those in the way of God and kill them wherever they may be. Imagine you see a verse in the Quran which says, permission has been given towards the believers to fight. When you see these verses in the Quran which are known as the jihad verses, do we know how to reply? Or is it that the Muslims use the Quran like how the Jews use the Quran? Where the Jews just used it like a donkey who was carrying luggage. Are the Muslims just using the Quran for weddings and funerals? Or are the Muslims actually reading the Quran and trying to understand why the Prophet Muhammad said that in this book is a guidance to mankind? Because every Muslim, and especially every Shia, should see the Quran today, should see which verses they are using to attack us. Because they are using these verses to say Muhammad, the turban head, was someone, all he encouraged is bomb blasts that we see today. How do we reply? How do we reply on this concept of jihad in Islam? It's the word which is used on so many occasions. In virtually everywhere you go, you hear the word jihad, jihad, jihad. Jihad in Afghanistan, jihad in Karbala, jihad in wherever, in Spain, jihad in Bosnia and Chechnya, jihad in wherever. You see jihad being mentioned everywhere in every newspaper. How do we explain the concept of jihad in order that our people are able to reply to a picture where our Prophet has a bomb sitting on his head? Because this is not easy to take. A person needs to know how to reply. How do we reply? First and foremost, when you look at the word jihad, you understand that the word means to struggle. It brings an idea in mankind's life that every human being goes through a struggle one way or another in every area in his life. We may struggle at home to achieve good results in our studies. We may struggle at home to make our daughter eventually wear hijab. We may struggle at home to eventually bring our son to a mosque, rather than only in Muharram and Ramadan where every Tom, Dick and Harry comes. Rather we want to bring him in Imam Ali al-Hadi or Imam Hamid al-Jawad's Mawlud, where there's about 17 people and the caretaker and the crowd. We want to actually struggle in every area in our life to try and bring our children towards a particular way. We struggle, for example, in our studies. We struggle through knowledge. And the basis is always the word jihad. Hence you notice with our scholars, when they struggle through knowledge and they reach the highest level, what are they called? Mujtahid. Because that person has done jihad through the concept of knowledge. Therefore, when you struggle through all these books, you reach a level where you are called a mujtahid, a man who has undertaken a struggle through some of the most difficult sciences in order to be able to decipher and explain the sciences to the people. Hence one notices, for example, a person like Allam al-Hilli, who is recognized as arguably one of our greatest scholars in Shia history. Allam al-Hilli used to have the most minimum sleep in the night. He used to study all the time. He used to defend Al-Muhammad all the time, that the sultans of his land used to say, we have not seen a scholar of greatness like Allam al-Hilli of the Shia school. And you notice with someone like Allam al-Hilli, the reason he became the highest mujtahid was because he struggled in every area in his life. In his knowledge, he broke all the boundaries. That once there was a scholar, a king, who had divorced his wife. He divorced his wife in the three-pronged divorce. You know when you say divorce, 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 and then you think about it and you think, why did I just do that? This is exactly what he did. He divorced his wife with the three-pronged divorce, and now he's thinking, now how do I get back to my wife? Because according to some Sunni schools, you can't get back to your wife unless someone actually goes and marries her, and then he leaves her, and then you can get back to her. So he says, is there anyone who can actually come and help me? They replied to him, there is someone from the Rafidi school. Rafidi means what? Those who rejected the three. We are called the Rafidis. In Egyptian films, those of you who watch Mrs. Imam and Husni and so on, you will find that they mention when they are swearing, they say, Yabn al-Rafidi. Yes, the son of the rejectors. The idea being, we are the rejectors. So they said that there is a person who is a rejector, he's the master of the rejectors, he can come and help you. Allam al-Hilli is called. What's the problem? The king's divorced his wife. What type of divorce? The three-prong. Okay, so he needs to use the Shia fiqh to get back to his wife. So Allam al-Hilli comes with his shoes, and he comes and he enters the mosque. When he comes and enters the mosque, he brings his shoes with him. He brings the shoes with him, he enters, he sees the leader, the sultan there, he says, and he doesn't bow down to him. The sultan's wondering, everyone who walks in to see me normally bows down. But this guy has walked in, he hasn't even bowed down once. How can this be appropriate? So he looks at him and he says, Allam al-Hilli, you entered my mosque and you don't bow down to me, and you've got the arrogance to come in with your shoes? Allam al-Hilli looks at him and he says, well, the reason I don't bow down to you is because in the school of Al-Muhammad, we don't bow down to no one but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason... And he says, number two, the reason I brought my shoes with me is because in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, the Hanafis, when he left his shoes outside the mosque, they stole his shoes. At this moment, the scholars who are around the king, they're looking, they say, look at these Shia, look at these Rafidis. They don't know any history. He says, why? He says, there was no Hanafis in the time of Rasulullah. He says, oh, I'm sorry, it must have been the Malikis. Definitely it was the Malikis. Again, he looks around and he says, look at these Shia. There was no Malikis in the time of Rasulullah. He says, it's the Shafi'is, definitely the Shafi'is, they are the ones. And he said, no, there was no Shafi'is, you Shia have no knowledge. He said, the Hanabil, the Hanbalis, they are definitely the one who stole the shoes. He said, no, there was no Hanabil. Allam al-Hilli looked at the fuqaha and he looked at the king. He said, then can you tell me which school actually was there from the time of Muhammad? Here the point was, if every other school started 160 years later, which school was there in the time of Rasulullah? In this way, Allam al-Hilli was showing us that a person who does jihad and becomes a mujtahid struggles to such an extent that the world of books becomes easy for him. When some of our people come to us and there's the mujtahid is written down, this is haram for you to do in your gatherings. Someone comes to you and says, Sayyid Ammar, in my opinion it's not haram. What do you mean? Why? I don't see why it's haram. Rasulullah lived 1,400 years ago. He doesn't know what we're facing now. Muhammad, who came as the last prophet, doesn't know what we're facing now. This person, he looks at the mujtahid's one line as being just a piece of cake. When a person who's a mujtahid writes, this is haram, for example, he has gone through the Quran,